Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here with an interesting video to talk about because there was some major news in the Hearthstone world late last week at this point, but I'm talking about it now because there are some major implications for Arena we have here because yet another mode is being completely killed off in Hearthstone, and it is Duels. Unfortunately, for anyone that enjoyed Duels, I really didn't play it much myself. We'll go over what the changes are here, but the short of it is this is not like killed off like Mercenaries. You know how we're keeping the client? No, they're actually killing it off dead. It's not even going to be in the game anymore as of April. Part of it is actually going to be entering into Arena, at least temporarily, so let's get into that. And as they say here, as we think about the future of Hearthstone, where the team can focus their best efforts, we made the difficult decision to discontinue support for Duels. They will not make any more scheduled updates to Duels, and the mode itself will be removed from the client in April. This will allow us to shift our resources where we feel the most impact, including traditional Hearthstone, Battlegrounds, and more. Battlegrounds, blah blah blah. But also, we're trying out some Duels Treasures in our next Arena season. More details soon. We want to thank you guys, blah 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 blah. Okay, so a couple main pieces there. Again, as I mentioned, yeah, they are completely removing it from the client, and I could go on and on about like the history of Duels and, you know, how it was kind of supposed to be like the replacement for Arena to some extent, or at least, you know, like it was kind of like the amplified version of Arena, just never really took off for various reasons. There's a lot of videos about that. Maybe I'll make one at some point myself, but that stuff is out there. As kind of in the more macro, like, what does this mean for Arena? Like, I thought it would be worth like bringing up, like, this is the chart here. I'll hide myself for a second just so you can see. I mean, this is Firestone. This is not indicative of the entire player population here. I'll cover this part back up because this is just flat lines for Wild, Duels, and all the other modes. Twist being really far down here, by the way. But you can actually see how Arena's been doing much better. I do think this isn't indicative of the total population. Again, Firestone particularly does appeal to Arena players for several reasons. So Arena is a lot more popular here, but you can see like how relatively unpopular a lot of the other modes are, and this is Duels way down here. Duels is a very expensive mode to maintain just due to, you know, all the treasures and a lot of things. It's kind of been like an internal passion project for the devs for a long time, I think, and that's a big reason that they're canning it, I believe. And then, you know, it does not look good for Twist. Twist you can barely even see on the map already. Twist is not even playable right now, so there's a lot of issues there. But the point is that, you know, Arena, I think, has really taken its spot as one of the major modes in Hearthstone. It did not look nearly this good. If you look even back like a year ago, for example, Arena was like way down where like Wild was, but Arena is like a much more popular mode than it has been. And I think this really solidifies Arena's position there because Arena takes relatively a lot less effort to maintain, and this is just I think you could probably say this is, you know, the Hearthstone team downsizing to some extent, or at least accommodating the downsizing that's been thrust upon them for various reasons. And for people that are worried, is like, oh, is Arena gonna be next? First of all, I don't think so, because I think Twist is gonna be next if anything, but it's very possible that they, you know, try to revamp Twist and hopefully have something work out. Anyway, so the point is, I think very much you don't need to worry about Arena disappearing from this. Fine, and if anything, this means Arena might even get even more effort, such as, you know, them trying out these Duels Treasures in Arena. There are a couple important things to talk about. This is not the first time they've done something like this, by the way, because like Taverns of Time was something that they had a couple times. They did it in 2018. They also did it 2022. I almost said last year, but this is another time where they had basically Arena exclusive cards. Chromie looks very similar to a certain Caverns of Time card that came back more recently, but, you know, this is something that was positively received. When they've done this before, it was totally cool. And one critical piece of information as well, this was posted actually in the Vicious Syndicate Discord. If you don't know Vicious Syndicate, they do a lot of analysis, mainly for Standard, but I believe they do some of the other modes as well. But this was posted by Ridiculous Hat, who's a dev at Blizzard, and he gave the additional info that the Duels Treasures in Arena will be active Pool 1 treasures from a curated list, and they will be the 30th pick of the draft. Kind of like how Legendaries are the first pick, these Duels Treasures will be the 30th pick. I should also mention as well, they mentioned next Arena season. They haven't officially announced this, I don't believe yet, but they've been doing this for years, so it's very predictable. The Heroic Brawl is ongoing right now, and right after the Heroic Brawl ends is always when they announce the mini set, and then the mini set comes out the next week. So we don't know that 100%. They could change it, but like, it's the right amount of time. It's been 2 months almost exactly since the set came out. So, you know, the mini set should be getting announced literally any day now. With that, I want to spend the rest of the video just talking basically about what these Duels Treasures are. I believe I've covered everything else I wanted to talk about. So that is the last piece of this, is what exactly should we expect from these active treasures. Kind of the TLDR is that I think this is going to be kind of just like how it is taking a similar spot in the draft, having one per deck for the legendaries. It's going to behave somewhat similarly, but there are a couple factors, I think, is that these things are, a lot of these are very situational, so are legendaries, frankly, but like, as far as like power level, these things are kind of all over the place, and we'll talk about where some of the outliers are, but a lot of the stronger ones, I think, are really not going to be that much stronger, or even any stronger than just cards that are draftable, like Forge of Wills, or like Waste Remover, Midnight Wolf, for example, or one of the more extreme ones might be more comparable to like Oreska. But these are, as these are only the pool 1 treasures, there are several pools. You can have like ultra rare pool 2s and stuff. These would be completely game breaking. Some of the passives would also be like completely game breaking, but these active pool 1 treasures are pretty tame in power level. As some people are really worried about that, I think it's not going to be that much like a big deal as far as like, oh, the treasure is going to like automatically win you the game necessarily. No more than like a legendary would, for example, even in the most extreme case. But with that, I just wanted to talk about really quickly. I'll go very quickly, but we'll go over like all of these individually because they are going to be completely fresh new cards. Let's just jump in. Like the first one, Amalgamate. This basically destroys all your minions, combines them all their stats into one. I don't know why you would even want to do this, to be frank. I mean, if you have like a lot of Nerubian eggs or something, you know, like that would be great. But like, I mean, this is something, by the way, since you're drafting at pick 30, it's not like you can have this and know and draft around it, right? You have to have already drafted your deck. And that's going to limit a lot of the potential of some of these situational cards as well, because it's not going to line up. And we know that they're curating them, but we don't know which ones they're curating out. So that's the other factor as well. So, you know, we'll have to see with that. Next up, Mind Apocalypse. Both players draw 2 cards and gain a mana crystal. This is a completely even effect. And generally, I mean, it's like your opponent gets it too. Ideally, you would be drafting some deck that really benefits from ramp. But again, in Arena, you can't expect this. So I don't know. Doesn't seem very consistent at all. It's probably not something you want. Supercharge. This is the first one that's pretty good. 0 mana, give your minions +2 health. A couple big potentials for this. Number 1, you can just vomit your hand, like turn 1 through 3, and just play as many minions as possible and then supercharge them, and then hopefully you just win automatically. That's one way. But also, this is just something where some decks have issues actually spending cards, and then you can just put this into a more late game deck, and then sometime when you have a board swing turn, when you play multiple minions, you just, in the late game, you just get +6 health. Also just very useful. So that's just a good card, but nothing that seems overtly game breaking. Next up, Blade of Quel'Dor. I think this is combined with the Hilt of Quel'Dor. These two you're supposed to be able to combine in duels. You're not going to be doing that in Arena. You're only ever going to have one. So I kind of expect these are both just not going to exist. But this one would be like, you know, it'd be pickable, but it's a worse bone breaker. This one, the Hilt is actually a good card because it's +3/+3, like for 1 mana. It's very efficient, but not what you'd think about as being like your legendary thing. Same as like Death Charger here, 1 mana 2/3 charge. Death Rattle deal 3 to your hero. So it's basically like, I think you'd say it's basically a slightly better Flame Imp essentially, not something that, you know, feels like a legendary. Next one, Gentleman's Top Hat. Give a minion +2/+2, and Death Rattle, give your top hat to another friendly minion. Rewards you for having a lot of minions or a lot of sticky minions on board, and then it's a lot of stats. There's a lot of potential there, but it has a big requirement on your opponent not being able to clear you off of the board, but then it is potentially game winning if your opponent just isn't able to deal with it. Except Hunter's Insight, 1 mana arcane spell, reduce the cards of all costs in your hand by 1. Kind of similar situation to the Supercharge actually. It's like either you can play it on turn 1 and then it just allows you to get a lot of good tempo early on, which would be nice. If you have a big hand size late in the game, this would just get a lot of value as far as mana cheat. That's probably the better way you'd really be aiming to use it. But otherwise it's just a card that doesn't do anything, so in like more of a mid-range or typical deck, just not very useful. What is going to be very useful though is the Party Portal. 1 mana 0/4, when you cast a spell, summon a random minion the same cost. It's basically like that mage weapon that was really good from the previous expansion that just came out. You can just play this if you're a mage, for example. You just play this on turn 8 with a Firelands Portal, and you get a 0/4 they have to deal with, and you get a 7-drop as well. This thing actually seems very, very strong. I think this is going to be one of the strongest ones actually, but yeah, because that's pretty terrifying. If your opponent just can't kill it, it's going to win the game by itself. I would almost wonder if that one gets curated out, but we'll see. I kind of guess they won't be curating out that many of the strong ones. I actually think they'll probably be curating out a lot of the weak ones, but you never know. We'll have to see. Next up, Sow the Seeds. 1 mana, give all minions in your deck +1/+1. It's not even deck in hand, it's just deck, so that doesn't seem... it's very slow to do anything. It seems like, honestly, probably a worse Embiggen, right? It's just doesn't seem very good. Next up, this one is good. Spyglass. 1 mana, put a copy of a random card in your opponent's hand into yours. It costs 3 less. That's one that can just be very strong, obviously. You can get lucky and just steal a legendary, but in general, I mean, you're getting a mana cheated card. So it's a card that your opponent presumably drafted or generated, so probably get something good. That just seems like a very good card. This is, definitely very good. Next up, I wonder if they're going to keep these in. There's a couple ones like this, but it's like Loyal Henchman, start a game, draw this. Actually, they probably would keep this unless they think it's too strong. It always starts in your opening hand, and then the longer you hold it, the bigger it gets. So you just get like a giant 2 mana taunt sometime in the mid to late game. Obviously, is very, very good. Next up, we have Necrotic Poison, which is 2 mana assassinate. So, I mean, yeah, that's really good. Next up, Blood Moon. Giving minions +1/+1 and lifesteal. So you can use it as a buff in an aggro deck, but it's a little overpriced, right? You probably wouldn't be super valuable for that reason. You would want this more as a tool for if you're a slower deck, just trying to hold on, right? Because that's what you'd really be wanting it for, is that lifesteal. When your opponent's trying to ignore your board and go face, you just play this, and then, well, you're just going to heal to full because you have a bunch of stats with lifesteal, right? That would be the idea. Pretty expensive, but it is very powerful in that right case there. Next up, Clockwork Assistant, 3 mana 1/1 mech, has +1/+1 for each spell you've cast this game. Obviously, some decks are going to be a lot better at using this than others. Most decks aren't going to be able to use this very efficiently in the early game. But most decks, later on, this is going to be, probably at least a 3 mana 5/5 in most decks nowadays, but some decks it's going to be completely huge, so... Next up, we have a couple of these that are pretty similar. These both upgrade and shuffle into your deck each time you use them. They go like 3, 6, and 9. Coin Pouch goes like 3-drop, 6-drop, and then the third form is 3, 6, and 9-drop all combined. Very high upside there. This one is like 3 1/1s, 3 2/2s, and then it's like 3 3/3 lifesteals. This one definitely seems a lot worse than the other ones. I think this is supposed to have some relevance for Shadow Synergy, is why it's weaker, but like, yeah. This one just seems bad because, like, by the time you're shuffling and drawing the second form, it's probably not even that good. And the first form is not good. Like, Desert Hare is a terrible card, right? It's just not very good. Coin Pouch is a lot better, I think, just because the forms are probably individually better. And yeah, I mean, if you do get that big one, it's a huge thing, right? So... that one's slightly more pickable, but I still don't even know if this is really that good of a card individually, honestly. What is definitely a good card, though, is Detective Murloc Holmes. 3 mana 3/4. Whenever your opponent draws a card, add a copy to your hand. So obviously you play this 3 mana 3/4, and then you get to draw their card as well. You get to know what it is. You gain information. You get an extra card, and they have to kill this. Otherwise, you just keep getting more cards, and as well, they can't really draw cards to try to find an answer because then you just get more cards, right? So this is a very, very strong card. Next up we have Enrage, which is just like 3 mana, give your hero +6 attack this turn. It's efficient, I guess, but okay, it is burn, but yeah, again, just not something you'd think of as like a legendary. It would be similar to a legendary though. Golden Kobold, 3 mana 6/6 taunt Battlecry, replace your hand, not deck, but just hand with legendary minions. It replaces all cards, not just minions. This one, if it is in, is going to be, I mean, it's very strong because it's a 3 mana 6/6 taunt, and then honestly, replacing your hand with legendaries is probably negative, but I mean, you're getting a 3 mana 6/6 taunt. You'll probably high roll some legendaries, so it's probably worth it. The next one here, Grimmer Patron, this is actually a mistake, I think, because this is actually a tier 2 treasure suit. That was one thing that people were worried about. This is on the, I could have mentioned, this is on the Hearthstone wiki. I happen to be using Phantom's version just because it fit better. They're not always 100% accurate with this stuff. But this is actually a tier 2 treasure. I think it was a tier 1 treasure at one point, but that one's actually not in. So that's something to be important, because this would be terrifying, but that's just not going to be in. Next up, we have Jaws, 3 mana 1/5 weapon. Whenever a minion with Death Rattle dies, gain +2 attack. Very high potential. There's a lot of Death Rattles. Honestly though, there just aren't that many Death Rattles in the game right now. There's probably enough to make this. I mean, you only really need 1 buff for this to be completely insane, right? So it's likely this would be pretty strong, but it's still not going to be completely reliable. A 3 mana 1/5 weapon still isn't like the worst thing in the world to have, but you obviously be really hoping to get some kind of synergy for that. If you have enough synergy, like this literally kills the opponent, right? You get like a 7/5 weapon or something, like you will just win. A little bit unreliable with that synergy, I think. Next up, we have Looming Presence, which is Arcane Intellect with +4 armor. I mean, Arcane Intellect's not that great, but 4 armor is, you know, it makes it notably better. So it's like, it's a solid card, right? Reasonable. Next up, Mage Armor. I would kind of guess this gets curated out. I mean, 3 mana gain 10. I mean, it's efficient, but yeah, I mean, do you really want that? Probably not. Some decks would, right? But probably, I would guess that's going to be curated out. Next up, we have Mutating Injection, 3 mana 4/4. Give a minion +4/+4 in taunt, nature spell. It's very efficient, right? It's just like a better Blessing Kings. Blessing Kings is actually still a card in the game, surprisingly. You know, it hasn't been buffed. A lot of other cards were, but that one wasn't buffed. So it was just a better Blessing Kings, more modern efficiency. So decent card, right? But nothing game-breaking. Except Old Militia Horn, give your minions +1/+1 in taunt, upgrade it, and shuffle into your deck as well, similar to the other ones. This one upgrades into +2/+2 in taunt, and the third version is like +4/+4 taunt and Divine Shield, which that one is very insane as well. Similar to the other ones, it kind of starts out being like a somewhat weak card, and then it has the potential later on, but I'm not sure how great that is just overall. Well, what is going to be, I think, one of the strongest cards is going to be Puzzle Box, 3 mana, transform all minions into random ones that cost 3 or more. This is one, though, that it requires you, I mean, obviously the whole idea of this, you could transform an enemy in very rare cases, but because it makes them cost 3 or more, it's pretty risky, obviously. You really need to be able to clear off your opponent's board completely, just have a couple, really anything on your board, and then you just play this, and it's going to be a huge tempo boost for you almost all of the time, right? That would be the idea, but that is like very much potentially a game-ending card in your favor if you're the one who plays it. So that's going to be one to watch out for. Next up, we have Surly Mob, another one of these upgrade ones. Destroy a random enemy minion. And this is probably the strongest one because it starts off being just a deadly shot, but that's still a pickable card. The next one is 2 minions. And then the third one is silence and destroy all enemy minions, which is obviously completely broken, right? So that's going to be, I think, the strongest out of all of the upgrade cards, I would think. Coin Pouch has a really good third form, but the first 2 forms aren't nearly as good as this one, so that's why I think that one's the best. Next up, we have the Exorciser, 3 mana, 3/3 weapon, silence any minion attacked by this weapon. The silence, a lot of times, just isn't going to matter. Sometimes it will, obviously, so that's nice to have. A lot of times, though, you're just going to be happy to have a 3 mana, 3/3 weapon, because that's pretty efficient still by modern standards, so just a very good card. This would be a solid one that you would definitely pick a lot. You can get it in non-weapon classes, too. It's going to add value as well, because just having any weapon that does anything really in a non-weapon class is really good. So I think this is going to be a very common card you'll see picked and want to pick yourself. Next up, Stone of Jordan, gain +2 attack this turn only, draw 2 cards, give any spells drawn. spell damage +1. So kind of similar to the other one, which was like a boosted Arcane Intellect where you got 4 armor. This one gives you 2 removal the same turn and the potential for spell damage. Probably not going to be a big thing there most of the time, but also just, you know, a decent value generator card. So overall, not too bad. Next up, we have Vampiric Fangs, which is a cheaper assassinate that also restores its health to your hero. So kind of like, I don't know if you would call this better or worse than the Priest card, which is a 4-mana version of this, but also heals your board. It's probably weaker than that just because of the potential to gain more tempo out of that, but even though it's cheaper. But yeah, I mean, it is a solid card. You'll be happy to have it a lot. Worshipper, 3 mana, 2 for your heroes, +3 attack on your turn. The turn you play it, it's very good. A 2/4 with a 3 damage removal or 3 face damage. And it's also the added value that your opponent needs to kill it. Otherwise, you just keep getting +3 attack every turn. That actually makes it a pretty solid card itself. Next up is Astral Portal. 4 mana arcane spell, summon a random legendary minion. It's just very, that's just a very high variance thing. There's a lot of legendaries that are just kind of mediocre to even bad stats, and some of them obviously are Deathwing or something, so just going to be unbelievably inconsistent. There's a lot of legendaries that you just aren't going to get the battle cry, which is the whole point of the legendary, right? You get like an Elise Savior or something, right? The 8 drop, but it's only a 5/5, and it's a 5/5, so it's nice, but you know, you're not getting the whole point. So something where if you're just willing to gamble, you can take it. Next up, there's the Greedy Pickaxe. 4 mana, 2/2 weapon. After your hero attacks, gain an empty mana crystal. This is a weird one because if you have this on turn 4, that's a lot of ramp, and that's going to be very, very good, assuming you can get over the initial mana loss of playing a 4 mana, 2/2 weapon, which you should be able to. It does do well more than that in terms of value and just having that extra ramp. However, the problem is also very good on turn 4, but if you draw it later, it's terrible. So, you know, you're not going to. I guess even in the late game, it technically does go face, so it's still 4 damage over 2 turns, right? So it's not completely useless, but obviously it wouldn't be a card that you would want. Next up is a weird one. The Loyal Sidekick, 4 mana, 2/2 taunt, has +1/+1 for each opponent you've defeated this run. The problem with that is, I'm kind of wondering if this gets curated out, like, because that just seems weird. They obviously were willing to put it into duels, but I think in duels, like, you didn't even actually get these until like after your second game, right? So it never started out being really bad. This is starting out at your 0/0 game. This is a 4 mana 2/2, which is terrible, right? I kind of feel like they're just going to curate this out. Obviously, the potential would be later on, it would be huge, but I kind of feel like they're just not going to have this in. Next up is Beastly Beauty, 5 mana 2/6 rush. After this attacks a minion and survives, it has to survive, so you can't like finish off a giant minion with this. Transform this into an 8/8. This is one of the cards that I was particularly thinking, I'm like, man, this actually seems pretty similar to like a Midnight Wolf nowadays, you know? So yeah, like if you looked at this like a year or two ago even, you'd think, oh my god, that's insane for Arena, but nowadays it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not like an outlier even. The next up we have is Butch. So 5 mana 2/2 rush that has +1/+1 for each friendly beast that died this game. Most decks, like even Hunter at this point, like doesn't usually have that many beasts. I mean, obviously, you know, in Hunter, this would probably be expected to be reasonable enough that you would definitely consider taking it, but a lot of times you really just aren't going to have beasts. So a lot of classes, this is just garbage unpickable. A couple other classes maybe, depending on rotation, and you're going to have it on pick 30, so you'll know whether or not you have the beast, right? So you'll know whether or not it should be good on average. Next up, another one of the stronger ones, Krusty the Crustacean, 5 mana 3/3 beast. Battle cry, destroy a minion, gain its attack and health. That's just going to be very efficient. I mean, you could even consider technically, even if you just eat like a 2/2 or a 3/2, this is already stat efficient, right? Like you can literally use this on anything. You're going to want to save it for something bigger just so to get more power out of it, but this is very aggressively statted. There is no point where this is going to be bad. It's just, unless your opponent literally never plays a minion, it's just always going to be good. So very strong card. Next up, Pure Cold, deal 5 mana frost spell, deal 8 damage to the enemy hero and freeze it. This is a weird one because it can't target minions, so it's very one-dimensional, right? It only goes face. But if you really think your deck is wanting that, and there's going to be times I kind of think where you're just going to have like this is just going to be the best option anyway, so you are going to take it probably more often than you would even want to. But yeah, next up we have Bubba, 6 mana 6/6 battle cry, summon 6 1/1 bloodhounds to attack an enemy minion. A little bit awkward with this one because you know, you have hand space, not hand space, but board space issues with this. So you're not always going to get all of the bloodhounds necessary, and that's going to be potentially awkward. In theory, right, this is again just kind of similar efficiency to like Midnight Wolf, for example. But yeah, the board space is going to limit it a lot. You'd actually prefer to be off board entirely to play it, just to get the maximum value. Overall, still, even if you're only getting like 3 or 4 hounds, still an efficient card, right? It's going to be comparable to like a fire elemental, for example. Just can't go face. You cannot target face with this. But yeah, just a solid card that you'll see a lot. Next up is Princess, another big dog. 7 mana 7/6 beast, battle cry, gain the death rattles of 3 random minions in your deck. Very potentially strong. I mean, if you have like a containment unit, for example, there might be there should be a rotation actually. We don't know what it's going to be, but like, so containment unit might not be in the game, but there's a good chance it will be. Just having this and a containment unit would guarantee you would always, you know, you'd have one or the other, right? So you'd always be able to have that, so it'd be reasonable, but obviously potential to get more. So very good potential, and you're getting on pick 30, so you'll know. However, you know, some decks just aren't going to have the death rattles to utilize this. That's going to limit it. And the last card, saving one of the best for last here, we have Holy Book. 8 mana holy spell, silence and destroy an enemy minion. Or a minion, doesn't actually have to be an enemy. But then you summon a 10/10 copy of it. So, you know, very big potential swing. You kill anything you want, even a containment unit or a princess or something. And then you just get a 10/10 copy yourself. So absolutely huge swing play. And that's kind of the card that I, you know, was thinking about. I'm like, you think about it, it's like, it's going to be situational. It's going to depend whether your opponent has removal, whatever, what exactly the board state is. But it's like, this reminds me a lot of like having a Reska. It's probably not even that much. It might be slightly better on average. I don't know. Reska doesn't always cleanly work out. But yeah, this is just, this is going to be one of the strongest cards you're going to see a lot. Because it is always going to be good again, and often will be very good. So that is it for all these cards. That took a while, longer than I thought it would, but obviously these were a lot of new cards, so I did want to talk about them all individually. Overall, yeah, we'll see what they choose to do. It'd be very interesting to see what Blizzard actually chooses to do curation-wise, because I honestly think, yeah, I don't know, because there's a possibility they even choose to remove, like, I mean, what would they remove? Like, they could remove, like, Party Portal. They tend to like cards. Obviously, there's a reason they have these cards. Like, there's things that are going to be frustrating, like Spyglass and Puzzle Box and Astral Portal and Holy Book, and some of these other ones just for power reasons, particularly like Holy Book and Krusty. But they're not exactly outliers by power standards, so I kind of expect they will do more as far as curating the bad ones out, more than curating the good ones out, because some of these are just like not cards you actually would want to have, you know, things like this, for example. Because I don't know, like I mentioned again how you're supposed to like combine these with multiple treasure picks, but that's not going to be a thing. And Death Charger, I imagine you're supposed to like OTK with this or something. I don't know, or just keep respawning it. I don't know. I haven't played enough Duels to know, but if you have, let me know in the comment section below. And let me know what you think about these. Let me know what you think they should do as far as curating. Which ones do you think they should? We know they're going to be curating out, which just means, you know, banning some of these before they even get there. So we'll have to see with that. But yeah, appreciate everyone hanging out till the end of the video. Of course, as always, hit all the like buttons, the comment button, subscribe button if you haven't already, and all that stuff. But yeah, appreciate everyone hanging out. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.